Alrighty, folks, welcome back to another edition of LandO's Lock-ins, the series in which we do our darndest, our best to try to make the most accurate CDL pick'em predictions possible. It has been a long time since I've been able to say that sentence. I don't have the exact days in front of me, but it's definitely been over a month, and I want to sincerely apologize for that. Now, I could come out and say, well, technically there weren't pick'ems for the Pro-Am, so I have nothing to apologize for, but I do. I should not have gone this long without recording a video, without doing anything. I'll be honest, I enjoyed my break, maybe a little too much. It caught me off guard when it came down to the Pro-Am. I didn't have a thumbnail ready, I had half my script done, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I got all this stuff I gotta do, and I ran out of time. So that's all on me, I apologize, but thankfully, for the sake of my reputation, for the sake of my record down here, it still looks okay. And Lord knows that if I would have made predictions, like official on paper predictions for the Pro-Am, it would look a lot worse than it does right now. What an event it was, guys. I mean, that was absolutely wild. The amount of stats that you could throw out there that just didn't mean anything, right? The number of top caliber teams that got eliminated, that didn't make it even into the top four. Like I think I tweeted out, like, our top four from Major 2 were totally different teams in the top four for the Pro-Am, which I don't think we've seen that happen in a very long time. Like, that massive of a swing where 8 out of the 12 teams have been top four in the last 2 events. It just goes to show the competitiveness of the league right now, the craziness of this title, etc. But I'm super excited because that only means that we have that much more of like an interesting setup for the Major 3 qualifiers, which are going to be going down this weekend. Super happy to be obviously providing you guys with some commentary on a few of these games, and really you could take a pick. I could literally just be like, I want this one, and it would be great. I could literally just pick out any one that I wanted, and it would work out perfectly. I know I'm just kind of hanging out today in this beautiful shirt. This is a Buc-ee's shirt, for those who are aware of Buc-ee's. It is a very large gas station here in Texas. You didn't know that we'd be talking about that, but it's an icon. It is a cultural icon here in Texas, and I just thought, you know what? Why not just sport it today? Why not just sport it in light of the return? So without further ado, I know we've went on long enough. These videos go on for hours, it feels like. So let's go ahead and get into our matches post Pro-Am. We don't know what to do. We're picking up pieces. Some teams are thriving. Some teams seem like they are on the absolute decline. And I guess in this matchup, it's a little bit different, but this is going to be a fun one, right? The London Royal Ravens taking on the LA Thieves to kick off Major 3. We are already halfway through the season. It's wild to think that. So we'll talk about the LA Thieves first, obviously, because they have the better tournament of the two. One of the most shocking turnarounds that I have seen in a tournament in one day to the next day ever, possibly. I mean, they literally go from getting full sailed, 3-0'd by the New York Subliners to then just going on a run. Like, I don't know how that happens. I don't know. And it feels like this LA Thieves team, who has been all about momentum. Like, they just feel like whenever they're on it, they're on it. When they're not, they are not, right? They go 0-5 at the Major 2 qualifiers. They get eliminated pretty early at the Major 2 tournament. It didn't feel like this was going to happen. I would have predicted instantly that they were just going to lose all their matches after that. But they didn't. They did not do that, right? The only team that they ended up losing to at this tournament was New York, right? Not just once, but twice. They lose to them in their very first match, and they lose to them in their last match, as the LA Thieves did make it into the finals. And their stats are impressive. Like, you look at their overall records, and there is a lot to be excited about if you are an LA Thieves fan. I don't think they're necessarily out of the woods yet by any means, but a finals appearance, even though it was single elimination when it comes down to the bracket, is excellent. I mean, they go 7-3 in Hardpoint. 2 of those 3 losses were to New York. They go 4-2 in Control. 2 of those losses were to New York. They have a 2-4 performance in Search Destroy, which is typical. But this is the LA Thieves team. It feels like that was in the Major 1 tournament, where they went 4-1 in the qualifiers. And I feel like Octane looked the best that he has looked all season long. Like, Octane looked excellent. I had a series in which I was casting over the LA Thieves versus Team War. One of the fastest series I have ever watched in my entire life. It was a 6-0 in the Search Destroy. I forget how the Control went, but it did not feel like that one was close. The Hardpoint was like 250 to like 150. It was a blowout. And I have not seen a search destroy performance like this one. It's not nearly as good as Sim's performance back at Black Ops 4, and whenever they faced off against units at champs, but it felt like that, where Draza was doing whatever it is that he wanted. And I feel like Draza had some unreal moments. I mean, Envoy, it looks like he's finally had some help. I know Kenny did not have a great first series, but his stats absolutely improved as the tournament went on. But to me, it felt like Octane's coming out party. It felt like Draza is here to stay as the flex. And they just saw so much more productivity. Again, the search destroys, not amazing, but they're at least winning the hard points and the controls more often. I think that Berlin control maybe could be something to add into their arsenal as well. But it is, it's wild. I tweeted from full sale to finals. How often have you ever heard that? It's crazy to see that the LA Thieves have had that turnaround. And now the question remains, is that only going to continue? I mean, are they going to level out a little bit? How are they going to play? And they're going to have a very good test to start things off versus the London Royal Ravens, who did have a last second change, right? Going into the Pro-Am Classic, they bring in Harry for Gizmo. Gizmo's dealing with some personal stuff, it seems like. So he, I believe, is headed home for the rest of the season. I could be early on saying that, but I'm almost positive that's the way that it sounds. So they bring in Harry, who was originally on the Toronto EU team, Toronto Academy EU team, which I know changed their, whole play style up last second. It obviously changes the Ravens play style up last second. And unfortunately for the Royal Ravens, they did not make it out of their group. However, you cannot really get all that angry at them, considering that they were in a pool with New York and the LA Thieves. And the two teams that they lost to were New York and the LA Thieves, the two teams that were in the final. So it is difficult to really get a good idea, right, for where this team stands. They did have a great first series versus War, in which all those games were close, but I think Harry had a really good first series. But it's interesting, right? Because if you're London, all things considered, bird's eye point of view, no pun intended, now looking at this series, looking at Major 3 qualifiers, they do need to be careful, right? Because, again, we don't know exactly where they stand. We don't know how they're going to play with Harry. Are they going to be that same team, right? Is he basically just the 1-for-1 for Gizmo? Are they going to see some positives in certain areas, some negatives in other areas? To the way that I have been told from, whether it's analysts or whether people who have watched this team, challenger players, it sounds like the one issue that people are concerned about with the Royal Ravens is the pace, because Gizmo was such a great player at transitioning into being a fast AR and a fast SMG. He could slow things down. When it came down to a Gavutsu, he could pick up the pace and really help lead the way with the rest of the players when it comes down to a Bocage type of atmosphere. And this game really tests you as a flex. There's no doubt about it. And what I've been told is that Harry is more of the slower paced AR, similar to a Zero type of figure. And they're worried about that translating into moments where he needs to pick up the pace. So that really is going to be the focus, I think, for the Royal Ravens roster, is that we know, right, that they have got a great core going. We know they have got some excellent players. The problem being, though, right, is that Gizmo is one of their marquee players, at least when it comes down to the online atmosphere. I know when it comes down to LAN, he hasn't had the greatest of showings, but I don't know, man. I'm very interested to see how the Royal Ravens play. And like I said, they have got an interesting schedule, because having Harry now into the lineup, they're going to have to stabilize quick, right? They sit right now third in the standings in the entirety of the CDL, just under FaZe and Optic. That is a very great place to be. The only issue is that all the teams below you seem to be starting to rise to the occasion, and they need to make sure that they are one of those rosters that does not fall quickly. Because when it comes down to this stage, like I said, you're going to start seeing a lot of teams win points, and they need to make sure that they're one of those teams that do. So they're going to play the LA Thieves, and they have Paris. Who knows how Paris is going to play? Moving forward, they've got Boston, they've got Toronto. Instantly off the bat, those are four teams who can beat them. And so, like I said, they sit as the number 3 team in the standings, and there's a lot of teams that are fast approaching them. So with that in mind, predictions for this series, LA Thieves versus the London Royal Ravens, it's a hard one to call, right? Given that the Ravens were not technically at full strength, when these two teams did face off against each other at the Pro-Am, but you have to give the edge to the Thieves still right now for this moment. London, they do like their Gavutsus and their Berlins, and they're especially going to like it with Harry. The thing for Thieves is that they're also happy to play you on anything but Bocage, at least when we're talking about the respawn. So all of those things in mind, I feel like London, one of their primary attacks could be in the search destroy department for this series. I hope this team, can be lethal in that, area. They go 1-2 in the search destroys at the Pro-Am, but all of them go to around 11. So it's hard to call exactly how those could have gone. They could have went one way, they could have went the other way, etc. But I'm going to give the LA Thieves the W, and I'm going to say that it's a 3-0, 3-1. I might give London the S&D. I had this originally written down as a 3-0, but I do think that London can be strong in one of these modes, whether it's the search, destroy, or control. I just like the LA Thieves. It's hard to not like them, especially if Octane's playing well, if Draza's looking great. That's not really going to affect Envoy too much, so I think that he's going to play that much better. And then, I think the one wild card here is Kenny in the new role, but I think you have to like the LA Thieves, given that this is literally 1 week from the tournament where they just played nearly lights out at, especially in the respawns. If London is not ready and, fast-paced, ready to go, they could get overwhelmed by an LA Thieves team that, as I said, can pick up pace very, very fast, especially if they're playing in a Gavutu, for example. So I like the LA Thieves in this one. We'll go and move on to the LA Gorillas versus Optic Texas. Now, this is a very, very interesting matchup, not just for one of these teams, but for both of these teams to kick off their Major 3 campaign. So we will start things off with right now the most interesting story going on right now in the CDL, that being Optic Texas. So a lot of updates going down. If you have not already seen it, right, we know the story that happened at the Pro-Am. Illy has a thumb injury. Optic Texas is scrimmaging with General coming into the Pro-Am. They get ready to join into their first match, and it turns out, no, it's not going to be General. Illy is deciding to go ahead and play. So he plays out that series, puts up like a 1.2 KD, 9K damage. They absolutely smoked Toronto EU Academy by like 80 plus kills. And then after that series is over, Illy's out again. It's something did not feel right. The way that he plays with his controller, he was having to change up settings. Did not have a great first map. He's like, okay, I can't do this. I got to go back to my old settings. Ends up having the issue with the thumb again. And then from there, the rest is history. We know that Optic goes on to have a much better performance than we all expected, than they themselves expected. And I think it's fair to say, coming into Major 3, we all assumed, okay, if Illy's still going to be out, they're going to be rocking with General. Not at all the case. So it's interesting, right? It is interesting that we have seen this many moves going down with Optic Texas. Rambo and Hex actually just came out with a video very, very a short time ago from the recording of this video, basically talking about how they're going to bring in a player by the name of Proloot from the Challenger scene. Proloot is a very well-seasoned player when it comes down to Challengers, played on New York Academy last season, ended up winning the North American Finals for Challengers last season, and I know he qualified for the Stage 3 Challengers Elite. And I know Elite games are going to be going on, I think, like today. I'm almost positive they're going on right now as I'm recording this, so I'm not sure if he's playing in those. He's probably scrimmaging with a new team. I know he was playing with like Brack and Too Real and Neptune, so that's going to be it's going to be a quick pivot for those players. But this is really interesting. Now, you could talk about, well, obviously they've had some roster changes, so, it is what it is. The reason why it's interesting is that it's not common that we see Optic Texas go to Challengers. And you're like, Landon, they just picked up General. Like, what are you talking about? The big thing, right, for Optic historically is that they don't go for rookies. They go for players who are established. Even when they picked up Envoy, which was somewhat of a surprise, he still had that full season of Black Ops 4 with Gen G. Prior to that, Midnight, etc. They usually don't go for these younger players. They go with players who have got some history. They go with players that have got a decent tenure, in them. Obviously, we talked about, Shotzi and Illy, that combination. Those guys have already won a world championship. They're younger guys, but still, that tends to be the trend with Optic lineups, is that they go with players that have got a little bit of experience, that are young, talented, and then they add them to the roster. You can say the same thing for a player like Dashi, right? When they picked him up back in Black Ops 4, he had a little bit, right, of proven, professional play. The interesting thing for Proloot is that he has not had a debut in the CDL yet, but he has been one of those up-and-coming players, somebody who has been talked about over the past 2 seasons, especially last year. I heard his name getting thrown around all over the place, especially when he joined the New York Academy team. So this is going to be an interesting situation. Like I said, not only for Optic, because they've had 3 players who have filled in over the past week and a half, but because they're adding a player that is not historically something that they do, bringing in a rookie. So I think this is going to be a great opportunity. Also, there's going to be a lot of nerves, right? If you are a player like Prolute, given the fact that he is making his official pro debut, he does not have any pro experience. So this is going to be some big shoes to fill. And we know, like we said, what Optic was able to do with General. They ended up making a decent run when it comes down to the tournament. They lose versus LA Thieves for a finals position at the Pro-Am, despite getting 3-0 smoked by the Florida Mutineers to kick off their run with General. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be really interesting to watch how this team, ends up performing, and they're going to have to face off against a solid LA Gorillas team who technically isn't in the best of positions right now. So for the Gorillas, right? Defending champions to last place. It was one of the biggest shocks, without a doubt, of the entire tournament. They get reverse swept by Toronto North America Academy. They lose I think it was a game 5 to Paris Legion, and then they get 3-0 swept by the Boston Breach. And when you look back at all three of those series, right? Toronto North America Academy, a great team, right? They were one map away, one search destroy round away from getting into bracket play. Without a doubt, the best looking challengers team at the tournament. Paris Legion, who obviously saw some improvements, and the Boston Breach, who are a designated top 4, top 5 team. You're the defending champions, right? You just win all those search destroys. You just beat the Atlanta FaZe 5-2 in the Major 2 finals, made the craziest losers bracket run we have ever seen in COD history, and they instantly get last place. I don't know. It's given. Okay, I'll take this. It was a weird tournament, no question about it. And I'll be the first one to say it. It wasn't like I instantly assumed, okay, well, LA Gorillas is the best team in the game. They're the best team in the game. No, I assumed that they were going to be hovering around the top 4 region, but for them to go into this tournament and get last place, not even make it out of groups, not even win a series, considering that all 3 of these series were winnable for them, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. You look back, and Asim didn't have a great event. I know he puts up like a 0.76 KD. Across the board, nobody was amazing. Nobody was stellar. The search destroys, which obviously have been the story for this team, the run that they made at Major 2. They go 2-3 in search destroy. They only win 2 respawns in 3 matches. Whether it was the Volk or the honeymoon period, I'm not exactly sure. And I still think this team, without a doubt, has got, a high ceiling. It's scary, right? It's scary to go from that high to an instant low. And the problem, right, whenever you are a team, and we've seen this throughout COD history, when you see a lot of success quick and you instantly plummet, the longer that you stay below water, it's bad for the team. I'll just go and put it that way. It is not good for the team to have that high instantly plummet. And if you don't come up quick, it very well could be something bad for the future of the lineup. I'm not going to say that that is the case for the LA Gorillas. They still have, they've got at least 2 matches this week to play. They've got, 5 total games that are Major 3 qualifiers. They absolutely have the ability to turn it around. But, they're definitely going to be hungry to want to win again. And this is a great opportunity. I think for both of these teams, all things considered, this is a good way to start off your tournament. To start off your qualifiers. Like if you're LAG, yeah, I'm going to play a team with a substitute. Absolutely. I want to play a team who's got hardly any practice, who's playing with a fill-in type of player. You have to imagine Prolute's going to be somewhat nervous coming into this matchup. I would take that game if I was LAG. On the flip side, if you're Optic Texas, heck yeah, I'll take this game. A team that just finished last place, who went 0-3, who's not winning search destroys, who's not winning respawns. Heck yeah, we'll absolutely line up to play the LA Gorillas. So it's hard, right, to really give like a favorite for this matchup. I think the instant favorite has to be LAG, but again, Optic Texas, just with a substitute in general, played way better than the LA Gorillas did. It's hard to know the way that this matchup is going to go. But I am really excited, obviously, for the debut of Prolute. They talked about it again in the video that him, from a role perspective, fits so much better in this team. General was way more comfortable in a main AR position. Obviously, they've got Dashy filling up that role right now. And so with that, Prolute's going to provide pace to this team. He's going to fit better in that way. I'm just interested to see the mechanics. I'm interested to see the communication as well. And, when it comes down to his play style, I think Optic is a roster that's going to need the comms. If you're going to be filling in for a player like Illy, You know, it's a lot of it's going to come down to the communication. A lot of it's going to come down to things that oftentimes rookies don't possess off the start. And so he's going to be put into a pretty interesting spot. And I'm interested to see the way that he plays. One thing too, that ProLoot, you know, does have, he has a search destroy back run very similar to Illy. I know the two of them. I used to cast over those two specifically all the time, and like wagers and S&D tournaments all the time. Like ProLoot is a player that I've heard about for a very, very long time in the search destroy side of things. So I'm excited for him. And I know that he is aware of what Illy can provide to a team. So with all those things in mind, again, a very, very big series, an interesting one at that. I think this one does go down to a game 5. I think that both these teams, again, are hungry to get a W. Both these teams are eager to start their major 3 campaign off in a good way. But I'm going to go out to Texas. I am. I like I said, man, they just had a substitute in general. They were able to figure things out. I just feel like LAG, it's going to take some time to get out of this rut. And for their sake, I hope it's this match, because it really needs to be this match. I just don't think that it will be. That quick dip that we saw is a little nerve-wracking for me. At least you have 3 out of those 4 Optic Texas members that you can rely on. And I'm going to go the way of saying that ProLoot, at least, you know, if you were to talk about like a KD perspective, you know, whatever, all those things, I think that he plays well. I don't think he's going to, you know, fall, if you will, in the stats dramatically in this series. Obviously, he's trying to figure out what to do. But I think that Optic Texas are able to level out quicker than LAG. They get the job done in a game 5, which is, again, a very, very interesting situation. So now we hop into the last game of Friday, without a doubt, one of my favorite games that we're going to have probably in all of the major 3 qualifiers. I think without a doubt, LAG, Optic, Atlanta FaZe New York are, to me, the 2 most fun games to watch here on day number 1. And best part about it, right, is that you've got the defending Pro-Am champions, the New York Subliners, taking on the Atlanta FaZe. I cannot wait to watch this series, and the reason why is because it's so informative. I love series that tell us things. I love series that, like, I don't know, I hate when we go into a match like in just regular qualifier play and you're like, okay, well, this team beat that team. I don't know exactly like how that team is going to look for the future. I don't know exactly what this match means in the overall perspective. We're going to know exactly what this matchup means, which is New York. Are they truly going to be the real deal, right? We know at the Pro-Am, they're the real deal. They're figuring everything out. They played excellent. But can they beat the Atlanta FaZe, right? Can they beat the Atlanta FaZe, who are a story all in themselves, right? The New York Subliners, incredible. The performance that they put on. You know, I don't think anybody really expected them to even get to the finals of this tournament. You know, I thought they could make a run, honestly, if I was being truthful, just because I know the type of player that Kismet is, but I did not think that they were going to play the way that they did. Not only did they win, not only did they go undefeated, but they looked amazing in almost everything. Like, to be honest with you, I mean, when it comes down to the issues that the Subliners have dealt with, it feels like all of those are getting figured out. And, you know, we talked about the trials. There was a lot of people who hated on the trial process that Minnesota did, that New York did, you know, understandably so. You know, I think the trials definitely have the ability to be good. I think without a doubt, you know, there can be some unhealthy habits, things that happen throughout those trials that can make rosters struggle. But at least from what we heard from D-Real, from what we heard, you know, in the quick no pressure series of the qualifier breakdown that they had, it felt like they were doing it for all the right reasons. Like, they even took Hydra out of the lineup. They're like, okay, what are we missing when Paco is not here? What are things that we need to improve on? And I thought that was great. I really appreciated the perspective. I appreciated the how transparent that they were. And clearly, they figured out some major weaknesses that they had, and they improved on almost all of them, if not every single one, which was winning hard points. Well, they did that. Communication, specifically with the SMGs, well, that's dramatically improved. You know, when it comes down to being clutch, that absolutely happened in the search destroys. It happened in a few of the hard points. Even going down to like the little things, their attack percentage on Tuscan control was horrible. 9%. What happens versus Toronto Ultra in their semifinal game? They're down 2-1. They won back-to-back attacking rounds that got them the edge. You know, it just felt like in every single aspect, they they lived up to the hype. They were able to deliver on a lot of the problems that they have been dealing with lately. And it just felt like Kismet fit in like a glove. Like he did exactly what he was supposed to do. He hopped in the hard point. He got 2 minutes plus, sometimes 3 minutes of hill time while also being up there in the engagements. To me, that was the most impressive thing, was that we would look at the ending scorecard. You know, you see that Paul has a great game. You see that Krim had a great game on Bocage. You saw that Hydra was doing Hydra things. And you're like, oh my gosh, Kismet went like, 35 and 37, 35 and 32, somewhere around there. And he has 2 minutes plus in the hill. How is the guy able to do that? And that just goes to show the productivity that he has on the map. He is always doing something to benefit the team. And that is what I think that the New York Subliners obviously were not having, and that they instantly are seeing the positives of. I think the teams also did mess up quite a bit in the vetoes versus them. I was banging my head against the wall when we saw that the New York Subliners are going to be able to play a 5th game 1 Bocage hardpoint in a row. Like, what are we doing? Like, why are we playing this team? I don't care why, right? I don't care if you're thinking, well, this team on paper, they shouldn't be good at Bocage. Like, what's going on here? Don't play them on it, right? Don't keep playing a team who is hot right now. Same thing can be said for like an LAG roster, when it comes down to, their tournament. If a team is hot, just don't play them on a map that they're hot on, especially if it is so obvious. So obvious. They played 5 straight Bocage game 1s and they won all of them. They win 8 out of their 9 overall hard points. The only hard point that they drop is to the LA Thieves in game 1 in the finals, when the LA Thieves decided, we're not playing Bocage for game 1. We are getting rid of that. And look what happened. They lost. It wasn't just those. Obviously, it wasn't just the hard points. New York, they won 5 out of their 6 search destroys. 4 of those were in round 11s. I went back and calculated. Kismet had major performances in round 11s specifically. He was, I'm trying to remember exactly. I think he got 9 out of their 16 kills in those round 11s. In one of those, he had an ace versus the London Royal Ravens. And every single situation where the New York Subliners went into a round 11, they were always down 5-4, which means that they were clutching up in the round 10s, getting themselves to a round 11. And oftentimes it was the Kismet show. Oftentimes it was the Hydra show. Oftentimes it was one player going off in particular, especially leading the way. They win 5 out of their 6 controls as well. I mean, it's just, the list goes on. They also, in one of those round 11 search and destroys, had a full sale versus the LA Thieves to kick off, their tournament, to kick off this new lineup. It was impressive. They lose 3 maps the entire tournament, which is so impressive considering how wild of an event this was. New York has got to be, absolutely thrilled with the way that their team played, with the way that Kismet played, especially, I think is incredibly notable. And we all know the Doctor Strange as well showed up from time to time, and it did feel like madness at this tournament. I mean, not to put the puns out there, but it didn't feel like a multiverse type of situation where we're like, what planet are we on? What universe are we in that we don't have in Atlanta, in Optic, in the top? It was crazy stuff. It was wild. And then obviously on top of that, Crim 6 also wins his 50th grand final. He has like 37 tournament wins now. It's wild stuff. So all those accolades, all those positives, now it is time to throw all of those to the side and focus on the Atlanta FaZe, who, as we said, don't make it to the top 4. I could not believe, I'll be honest with you, I could not believe that Atlanta FaZe lost the matchup to Optic Texas. I mean, us in the green room, we were talking, it was like, okay, how's this one going to go? I mean, what, is it going to be a 3-0 or is it going to be a 3-1 for Atlanta FaZe? That's just the truth of what it felt like was a very one-sided series going into it. And I guess that maybe Atlanta felt that way as well. I'm not exactly sure, but the Atlanta FaZe have had some bad losses, right, throughout their franchise history. We could talk about it, a few ones from Cold War, even from MW as well. Like you think back to like the LAG game, in Cold War where they lose that one, even a prior few, losses, etc. But these are some of the worst losses, right, throughout Atlanta FaZe's franchise history. And they're right after one another. Like, they're very, very close to each other. A loss versus LAG in finals, unacceptable. You cannot lose to a team with a substitute. You are the Atlanta freaking FaZe. You cannot be losing to LAG, who obviously were on a hot spree, but just given those players, given the way that they had been looking previously, a substitute player, they should pick them apart. Doesn't happen, obviously. And then you go into this series versus Optic Texas, who, as we said, just brings in general. They're off a 3-0 loss versus, the Florida Mutineers. They look okay, doesn't look amazing, etc. We come into this match, and we're thinking, okay, it's going to be a smoke show. It's going to be a smoke fest. That's the way that it was in the opening hardpoint. And after that, it fell apart. It did. It fell apart. I'm looking back at the maps right now. Like I said, they get destroyed in the opening Gavutu, basically get 100-point clubbed. Optic wins the Tuscan Search Destroy 6-3. Atlanta answers in the Berlin control. We go to the Tuscan hardpoint, where both teams historically are great on, but again, you have General in the lineup. Lose a 6-point game, and then they lose in round 10 in the Berlin S&D. It's just unacceptable. And again, for an Atlanta FaZe team who dominated, literally one of the most historically dominant seasons that we have seen in COD history. They are winning 60% of their hard points and their search destroys. They are winning a CDL record high 80+% of their controls. And they're losing to LAG in finals. They're losing to teams with substitutes. It's just difficult because, again, this Atlanta team, we expect to hold, and understandably so, we hold them to a higher regard than a lot of other teams out there. Arguably every team in the CDL, other than Atlanta FaZe, we hold to maybe even I would say like an unnecessary, but maybe a unrealistic expectation just because of the players they have on the team. You look at the players on the team, I almost laugh when I think about it. They have Simp, they have a Beezy, they have Celium, they have Arcides. It's wild. And the primary culprit that people are pointing to right now is in the search destroys. And I would agree. You look at their tournament, it's search destroys that are clearly not going their way. Hard points are going their way, controls are going their way majority of the time. It is really just search destroys. That seemed to be I forget their exact record. I'm looking back now. 6-13. They're 6-13 in Major 2 and at the Pro-Am in S&D. Arcides tweeted after their loss versus Optic Texas. He's like, hey, I'm running a sub and search destroy. I'm grabbing the bomb. I don't know what else to do in S&D. I don't know what else we're supposed to do. That has got to be the priority for the Atlanta FaZe, is to work on these search destroys, get those under wraps, and just focus up. Because again, they have yet to win a tournament this season after dominating, all of last year. It's interesting territory to be in. Now, I will say this really quickly, because I know we need to make the prediction. We need to move on. I'm not somebody who's like, okay, this is a make or break series. Atlanta are on the brink of a roster move. Of course not. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that from a, collective, from a narrative perspective, I'll say it that way. From a narrative perspective, we're starting to realize that Atlanta FaZe are not the Atlanta FaZe from last year. And I think it's slowly started to happen, right? The Major 1 loss, the Major 2 loss, and then here at the Pro-Am, it continues to happen. And so from a narrative perspective, we're starting to realize this. And you can say, well, we already knew it, from the first event. Not exactly. Not exactly. We're starting to figure out that Atlanta FaZe are not just beatable, but they're definitely not who we thought that they currently were and are at this moment. And I think the biggest point you have to, obviously reference is in the search destroys. A lot of people think that this is a dominant respawn team. Yes, but the search destroy has always been the bread and butter. It has always been the game mode for them. They have led in search destroy the past 2 seasons. That has been their mode. They are an unbelievable search destroy team who just happens to be so dominant in respawn, specifically last year in control. So with that in mind, it's a game mode that obviously has hurt them a very decent amount, and one that they have got to get wraps on very soon, because they look so slow. And when it comes down to decision making, when it comes down to their attacking rounds, it just looks like everybody's waiting for somebody to make the call. And so something's going to have to happen drastically for the Atlanta FaZe. And the big thing, too, to talk about, if we are going to talk about the Atlanta FaZe team, who is beatable, you have to keep in mind, they have got a very, very big week ahead. Now, arguably, it is more terrifying for the teams who are facing off against them than for Atlanta FaZe. But if they are losing search destroys and if they are losing series from time to time, they've got to be careful, because not only do they have New York off the rip, they've got Boston and they've got Optic for their next 2 games after that. So it's not going to just be, okay, cool, we got New York, let's relax, let's come into this, let's win. No, we also have Boston, we have Optic that we have to take on after this. So it is going to be a very interesting first 3 matches for the Atlanta FaZe. I could join you next week and be like, yeah, it was a quick, first week for Atlanta. It was a quick second week for Atlanta. They're back. Very easily could be having that conversation. But it is important at this moment in time to recognize that in this current state, there are questions and big questions on the Atlanta FaZe. Now, in regards to this series, we've gone on long enough. I apologize. We've talked about these first 3 games for such a long time. It's because they haven't talked in a long time, okay? I'm going to go with New York. I'm going to go with New York, and it's a bold pick. It's not a common pick. I would expect a lot of people to choose Atlanta FaZe in this series, but I think it's not been long at all for the New York subliners. I like New York when it comes down to the clutch moments in Search Destroy. They're not a team that's going to back down. I really like the core of this roster. I just feel like from every single aspect, everything is clicked, right? You've got the solid flex in Paul. You've got the designated AR who can absolutely put up numbers in Crim. Crim was talking oftentimes about how he felt bored because his teammates were doing such great work. Kismet is the unselfish, engagement-heavy, objective player. And then you have Hydra, who is a superstar player. It just feels like they're hitting all of those notes right now. Again, I am very hesitant on choosing New York. All of those things considered of why I've talked about Atlanta. But I do like the subliners to win this series 3-2, 3-1. I hesitate to say 3-1, but I'm going to go with a Game 5 victory for NYSL. I think it's going to be another big W for them. It's going to be a confidence booster. It could come down to like a round 10, round 11. But I think Search Destroys will continue to be the problem. I think New York at least has that. Obviously, their hard points looking great. FaZe might play them on a bocage, which would be interesting because we get to see those teams battle it out. But again, New York looks great in control as well. That's something to really consider. So all those things in mind. Also, I did want to mention this. Atlanta FaZe could have something very, very interesting brewing when it comes down to the controls. And one thing that could be scary for a lot of teams is not just their strength, right? We know their strengths when it comes down to Tuscan especially. We know their strengths when it comes down to either the defensive side. I know offense has not been great for them historically, but they're winning Gavutsus and they're winning Berlins. Berlin is like their new favorite control. So again, across the board, those, swing type of game modes could be scary for a lot of teams. So it might be that if we have a Bocage game 1, it might be almost a must win for New York if they want to have a guaranteed other Search Destroy to rely on, possibly at the end. But we'll see how it goes. But I do take New York in this series. Not with the highest amount of confidence. So let's put it that way. So let's move on. We gotta get through these somewhat quick, and we've only seen 3 games so far. Paris versus London, battle for Europe. First time in a while. The Paris could be the favorites. One of my favorite stories actually at the Pro-Am was the turnaround that we saw from the Legion. The way that the turnaround really that this roster had versus the Toronto North America Academy team, right? They had to win in a 3-1 fashion to make it out of groups to get into the bracket stage. They lose the first map, and then they turned up. They make a 5-3 comeback in the Search Destroy. They win a wild control. They go on to win the hard point. That guarantees themselves a spot in the brackets. And throughout the entirety of the tournament, it was Jimbo and Gravity. Jimbo had multiple games where he's dropping 40 plus kills. Gravity stepped up and was the number 3 highest KD at the entire Pro-Am, just under Celium and Dashi. Great company to be in, considering those are the 2 best ARs right now in the game. To be under them is high praise, without a doubt. So they finished top 8, but you could tell the team really utilized this month break to get better. It felt like Jimbo was all kinds of confident. Same thing could be said for Gravity. There were times where we were just in the green room like, what in the world? How is Gravity winning these gunfights? It was wild stuff. And the big thing for Paris with their schedule is that they actually do have the ability to get a winner spot versus, they play versus London, Seattle, New York, LAG, and Toronto. If they get a W here versus London, which is the whole point while we're talking about this, Seattle absolutely can happen. I think you'd write off New York. You might write off Toronto depending on how Toronto is playing, but you get a W versus London, a W versus Seattle, and then a W possibly versus LAG or Toronto. I mean, I like your chances to win one of those. If you're beating London and Seattle handily, you've got an opportunity to beat either LAG or Toronto. And obviously 3 is the magic number. 2 very well could do it. So you beat London, you got a great chance to beat Seattle as well. Again, a very, very opportune chance, right, for the Paris Legion to maybe squeak it out of groups and get a winners brackets position when it comes down to that. I keep saying groups. I'm sorry, not groups. Just get a winners bracket position. I'm sorry. I've probably said groups 100 times already. I'm in like pro-am mode right now. But like I said, it's not guaranteed, right? It's not a guaranteed W by any means for the Paris Legion these last 3 matchups, but a W versus London immensely helps their chances. So with that, we talked about the London Royal Ravens. We talked about them previously. I have them off of a loss to the LA Thieves 3-1. Somewhat of a convincing loss. Again, I'm not exactly sure how they're going to play. I think that series versus LA Thieves, if they do lose that, they'll have a few close maps. So we'll come into this matchup probably expecting London to be the favorites. But I think that you also have an argument for Paris as well. Again, not a whole lot of people were watching Paris games, but I was. Watched every single map they played. I think that this series will give, I'll say the prior series for London, I think will be good for them. Any practice that they can have is great coming into this matchup. With the substitute and bringing in Harry, it's not a fast moving type of thing. I know we've seen a lot of teams just bring in a player and it automatically works, aka LAG, aka New York, but it normally doesn't happen that way. This one's hard to call, and I hate to just simply go off of what just happened at the Pro-Am. Like I said, London doesn't get out of groups. Paris does. The thing for London, they lose to number 1 and number 2 team. They're off a loss versus LA Thieves, so they lost their last few games. As much as I would love to choose Paris, I am going to go for London to take this. I think just being on the brink of going down 0-2, I like the players. I like Afro. I like Nasty a lot. I think that Zero and obviously Harry has got a lot of potential as well. I really want to choose Paris in this game, and I might go back and change. And a lot of that could depend, how they play versus LA Thieves. If I see something that I don't like in a 3-1 loss, I may change this up. If obviously London wins that game versus LA Thieves, I like their chances to beat Paris as well. But I am going to say that London beats Paris. I think it goes down to a game 5, very, very close series. But I'm going to choose the Ravens to walk away with it. We're going to move on. Toronto versus Seattle. The way that I would describe this series, pressure, right? Toronto, they managed to negate it for a little while. Seattle, they now have it. As of the recording of this video, I will say very quickly, I have not seen a official roster change happen. There's all kinds of rumors going around that Surge could be making a move. I have not seen that. Let me check Twitter really quick. No, don't see anything. I checked, made sure. Do not see at least anything for this moment. Okay. Just want to double check, make sure I'm not talking about a team that just made a move. So with that in mind, like I said, pressure. When we talk about both these teams at the Pro-Am, I think there was a lot of pressure, especially on Toronto Ultra, right? You have just picked up Scrappy, who is one of the most talented players in Challengers right now. He's playing for the North American team. You have an entire European roster who is also at this tournament. I mean, literally, you have 8 very, very talented Challenger players, one of which is on your substitute, or one of which is on your bench, which just got picked up as a substitute. There's a lot of people who expected them to make a change going into the Pro-Am. They don't do that. What does that tell you, right? Toronto is looking. Toronto management is looking at how their academy teams are playing. There is pressure on the Ultra shoulders to perform, because if they don't, they're probably making a change. And they delivered. They did. They delivered a very solid performance at the Pro-Am. They finally started to win some hard points coming into the Pro-Am. They were 2-18 in their last 20. They go 5-5 at the tournament. They go 3-2 in Search Destroy. They go 3-2 in Control. So positive or even across the board. Kleenex had a solid event. Cammy at times was great. I think Bance had some great takeover moments. Inside had his maps as well. So I would say the win versus Florida was everything to me, because you know what? They take out a few of the easier teams in group play. Who really cares? You know, who really cares if, you know, Toronto ends up wiping away, you know, the Seattles and the Strike X's of the world. You know, they lost to Atlanta. So who really cared at that moment? But the fact that they were able to beat Florida, a team who was off of a top 4 at Major 2, I think was the series that proved that they still have some life in them. And like I said, they're not out of the woods by any means. You know, there's a lot of teams who, to me, are not out of the woods. LA Thieves are not out of the woods. Toronto is definitely not out of it yet, but you saw some signs of life, and you saw some moments where, hey, there could be something going on with the Toronto Ultra right now. On the side of Seattle, what in the heck happened? Like, what in the world went on with the Seattle Surge? I didn't cast a single game by Seattle, and I felt like they were out of the tournament before I realized that the Pro-Am was going on. They finished 0-3, one of those losses being to this very team in the Toronto Ultra. I think they went like 3-0 in Search Destroy, and I'm pretty sure they lost like everything else. Did they win a respawn? No, they did not. So they don't win a single respawn, but they win every single Search Destroy. They 6-0'd Atlanta FaZe on Desert Siege Search Destroy, and that was really the highlight of the weekend. They lost to FaZe, they lost to Toronto, and they lost to Strike X. You cannot lose to Strike X, okay? That to me was like, I know that your chances are over, right? There was a lot of teams who were like, okay, we're 0-2, we're out of the tournament. I don't care if you're out of the tournament. You can't go 0-3. You cannot lose to Strike X, because you could say to yourselves, guys, this match doesn't matter. We're down, we're out. Let's just move on. You can't do that, because you're going to look back at the tournament and you're like, wow, we lost to Strike X? Like, we actually allowed for that to happen? It's crazy. It is. And like I said, at Major 2, before the break happened, they beat Optic 3-0. They took Atlanta FaZe to a Game 5 round 11. And you're going to tell me that the Pro-Am, they go 0-3, one of which was a loss to Strike X, who, according to a lot of people, was probably the lowest challengers team on the ladder. It really bothered me, as you can tell. As a Seattle Surge supporter, it really ticked me off that they lost this. It ticked me off that they went 0-3. Granted, look back, right? You lost to Atlanta. Okay, cool. That happens. You lost to Toronto. Toronto looked good this tournament, okay? I could have got away with that if they beat Strike X. But the fact that they lost to that team, I don't know. Like I said, they win Search Destroys. They lose all the respawns. There's all kinds of talk right on what's going on right now with the Seattle Surge. You know, could they be bringing in, a player like Clayster? Could they be bringing in Scrappy? Could they be bringing in, name a player here, for one of their guys? It's a really weird situation. I don't know. It's unfortunate. I hate to see this happening to a team like Seattle, because we know the talent that exists. We've seen it on display, right? Whether it was the kickoff, whether it was at Major 2 when they were doing the thing, right? Mac is getting sick, dropping 40 bombs on Atlanta FaZe. Like, we know the potential is there. It is just a matter of the inconsistency. And I don't know, maybe they've just hit too much of a low or too much of a lull where they can't really reel it back in. I couldn't tell you who was the player to do it, who's the player to drop. I know the instant fingers are pointed at accuracy because of the stats thing, but I wouldn't personally do that. I don't know. I just think this is going to be a series that Toronto Ultra takes somewhat swiftly. Obviously, they beat them at the Pro-Am, which was a week ago. So Toronto were obviously going to be the favorites. I like them probably more in the hard points. You could argue the Search Destroys, and then the Control. I like Toronto as well. I think it's a 3-0 or a 3-1 because of how mad I am. I'm going to say a 3-0 for Toronto, and we're going to move on. Because like I said, I am ticked right now at the Surge. Please be better. I beg you. Florida versus Optic. This is a matchup that we've seen quite a bit lately. Florida did knock them out at Major 2. They also beat them 3-0 here at the Pro-Am, in which that was General's first game, with the team officially. So they get the matchup again. I have Optic currently at a 1-0 scoreline coming into this after taking down LAG. If they do not, this is instantly a massively important game for Optic Texas to win. Like I said, regardless if they win or lose, having a game under their belt is going to be important, right? If they beat Florida, perfect. You go 2-0 with Pro Loot, perfection. If not, you need to have a W here versus Florida. It cannot be understated. And I really like the Mutineers right now. I do. I think they lost to the Toronto Ultra in the single limb bracket where I had them. I was expecting them to move forward. They did not. But I'm still pretty happy with the way the Florida Mutineers are playing. They were a team who was considered to be in the bottom 4 for a long time. They come out at the Major 2 tournament, top 4 placement, one of the best placements that we've seen in a very long time from this core. It felt like this was the tournament where we were finally seeing Skies and Awakening perform at the exact same time, right? That has been the biggest critique on the team throughout Cold War was, hey, this team, they can't win this mode, but they can win that mode. They're a 3-1 or a 1-3 team. And while that is still true, we finally got to see Skies and Awakening both have excellent tournaments along with each other. We saw Vivid had some great moments. Dave Patty was great at different times as well. Dave Patty was especially excellent at the Major 2 tournament. So, well, I did feel like beating Toronto would have been like, yes. Like, if you are a Florida fan, it would have been like, okay, we are here. If you beat Toronto, I think that they are instantly... There's not nearly as many questions as there are still moving forward at Major 3 qualifiers, but I feel like they did have a really good stride, especially. And I do like them in this matchup, believe it or not. It's a hard one to call again. Florida has been called inconsistent, and I do believe that there are still questions there, but I do think that they're finally starting to get away from those. I think that Optic... I think they go 1-1. Obviously, 2-0 is perfect. I don't think that's going to happen. It could be a loss to LAG and a W here versus Florida. I think the more likely of the scenarios is that they beat LAG and do lose to Florida again. It would be 3 straight losses to Florida. But at the same time, the last technically 2 losses, if one happens here, wouldn't be with the team at full strength. I recently just watched a great content piece by the Florida Mutineers. If you have not done so, check out their YouTube channel. It was a great little documentary of them at Major 2. They were talking about the hype. They were talking about how much they love playing Optic Texas in a LAN environment. I think this team is fired up. And I think they're just ready to go. I love the things that I've heard from Dave Patty. He feels like he is the first guy in, first guy to show up, last guy to leave type of mentality. That's what you want to see. Awakening looks like he is, starting to hit different levels. Skies has been looking like MVP Skies from time to time. And it feels like when this team puts Vivid on a Bocage or a Tuscan, he just lets loose. And so I like their chances in this series. I think they take it 3-1. It's hard to call what maps are going to go what way. I feel like, you could say any combination and I would probably believe you. But I'm going to go with Florida 3-1 to take this. All right. Minnesota versus LAG. The way that I would describe this series would be as big games quickly. First, for the Minnesota Rocker, they did not rise to the occasion the way that many expected them to when it came down to the Pro-Am, right? They bring in Havoc in place of Major Maniac. There was all kinds of criticism tossed their way. There's a lot of teams that had made some roster changes or made some role changes coming into the tournament. I feel like for everybody else it worked out, except for Minnesota. It did not work out well for the Rocker. They did not have... It was basically the exact opposite of what New York saw with Kismet. Did not happen for Minnesota. I'll be totally honest with you. I never really got a chance to watch the Rocker really at this tournament, but they dropped their opening game versus Florida. They win the Search Destroy. They play versus Toronto Academy EU. They 3-0 them. However, every single game is close. 10-point hardpoint game, round 11 Siege, Search Destroy, and a round 5 Kavutsu Control. And then they go in versus Optic. They win the first Bocage. Actually, I did see that series. They win the first Bocage. They lose a round 11 Search Destroy. They lose the Control in Berlin. They lose the hardpoint on Berlin, which all of those games were close. So really the thing for Minnesota was that they were either winning close games or losing close games. Majority of the time, they're winning Search Destroys, or now they're apparently just a great Bocage team, which very well could be because of Havoc. I don't know. The big thing to think about for this series, right, is LAG, very scary chance that they could start off 0-2. If they lose to Optic, they could lose this one in Minnesota. So if you are an LAG fan, this is a scary week for you. This is also, in general, a very scary Major 3 qualifier for Minnesota because they have got LAG first, arguably one that they have the ability to take. Then they've got LAT, probably a very hot Thieves team right now. Then they've got Toronto. Again, who knows what Toronto, but Ultra have got the ability to win every mode, it seems like right now. a Florida team, which is a wild card. They can take you down quick, or they could get taken down fast. And then you've got the Atlanta FaZe, who technically are beatable, but it's not happening very often unless you have a substitute, apparently. So I don't know. Maybe Havoc wasn't brought in fast enough to where they could beat Atlanta FaZe, possibly. Or maybe they make a change last second before that game and they take it. Nah, all jokes aside, it's a scary schedule because you've got some, teams that you could definitely beat. But again, all of these rosters, it just feels like right now, LA Team, Toronto just got better. Florida, I feel like they're on the rise. Atlanta, you can never really rely on taking a W versus the Atlanta FaZe. So if they don't win this one versus LAG, again, we're in the scary territory of this roster change instantly being talked about how it didn't work, instantly being compared to the New York Subliners. Well, look at them. They brought in Kismet and now it's happening type of deal. And then they start to move down the ranks a little bit in regards to the overall standings. And I'll look at the standings really quick because I want to see where Minnesota sits. I know they're in the interesting territory of where like all rosters right now are very neck and neck with each other. We've got basically a 20-point swing between 6th and 10th place. And right now, Minnesota sits in 10th place. And the two teams that are below them are New York and Paris. The two teams that are above them are Seattle and Toronto. So they could make a little bit of a move, but the two teams who are below them, Paris, who I think have gotten better, New York, who obviously absolutely can overtake them this major. It's a scary spot to be in if you are the Rocker, to put it lightly. So, as I said, a big moment for both these teams. I think I described this one, like I said, as like big games quickly, big games out of the gate. I've got LAG off of a loss versus Optic Texas, and I don't know, it's hard because this to me is one of the most difficult matchups to call, especially if LAG do lose this versus Optic Texas. If Gorillas take this handily versus Optic, then I think that a lot of people are going to go with LAG to beat Minnesota. But in this game, I just feel like it could go either direction, and it's honestly so hard to like give a whole lot of analysis on this, the way that I think the vetoes could go, etc. I just feel like I'm going to go with Minnesota to win this. I don't know. It's weird to say that LAG are going to go 0-2, like they're going to continue on this spree. I just am. I don't know. You got to make tough decisions sometimes when you're making pick'ems, and I just did it. I'm acting like this is the biggest prediction of my life. I'm just going to say that Minnesota are going to take it. We're just going to move on. I don't know why I made that such a big of a deal. It's kind of like it was like it was like a cataclysmic type of move. Anyway, we're approaching the hour mark. We've got to hit these final three really quick. So, Seattle Surge versus Paris Legion. I want to buzz through this one quickly. If you were to ask me last week, I say Seattle 3-1, and that's it, right? Going to the Pro-Am before they even played, I would have said, oh yeah, Seattle's going to beat Paris. Yeah, what are you talking about? Of course. Now I'm thinking the opposite, right? I have Seattle 0-1 coming into this after a loss to the Toronto Ultra. I think that potentially wakes up Seattle, a little bit. I've got Paris, who are 0-1, losing a series versus the London Royal Ravens in a Game 5. The way that I would describe this is that it's essentially if this isn't a win, it's basically, hey, we're probably going to be in losers at the major three. Like that's basically the way that I would describe this series. The team that I think is going to be able to do that is in fact Paris. I think it's going to be a 3-1. I'm expecting Surge to wake up a little bit, but I think this is going to be the breaking point if they haven't already made a change. Obviously in this video, this could not matter at all because they made a change, but if they lose to Toronto and then they lose to Paris, I think this is the series where a move can be made. I do. I think this is the matchup that could allow for it to happen. I just think that they're in a big slump right now. This is the series where they have to wake up. And I think when they're trying to wake up to beat a Paris team that they, in their minds, expect to beat, they're going to run into Tom Gravity, who's playing a lot better. They're going to be running into an aggressive Jimbo. They're going to be running into John, who is crazy sometimes, and Temp, who is without a doubt one of the most slept-on players right now, statistically, in the CDL. So with that, we will move on. Paris, I think, take it. And we'll go ahead and move on to the LA Thieves versus the Minnesota Rocker. Are the LA Thieves about to have a perfect week? That's wild to think about. Like I said, if you were to ask me after the game versus New York, the first matchup at the Pro-Am, I'm like, this team's done. They're broken. They're not going to be able to do this. And now they very well could be starting off Major 3 Week 1 at a perfect 2-0. And I'll tell you right now, I've got them taking it. I do. I have Minnesota beating LAG. I think that Minnesota have got some life. I think they're better than some people think that they are. but I'm still going to go with LA Thieves to take it. It could be another search destroy situation where Minnesota takes the S&D, LA Thieves, win all the respawns, or it could be some variation of the two. It's hard to call exactly how both these teams are going to play. Again, in Minnesota, we watched 3 games with Havoc. Thankfully, we'll have a 4th one versus LAG before we make the prediction here. But I think that, like I said, Minnesota are 1-0, LAT are 1-0, and I think that the Thieves are the team to improve to 2-0. Like I said, from 4-1 at Major 2, or in Major 1 to 0-5 at the Major 2 qualifiers, now to a 2-0 start at the Major 3 qualifiers, just as the definition of what has been a wild season for the LA Thieves. We'll go and move on to our final game, our final matchup here of the Major 3 qualifiers week 1. It has been a wild week full of crazy games, wild performances, and now we end things off with a good old New York versus Boston rivalry. I have loved this rivalry so far throughout the season. We've had some excellent games go down between these two. And this is a fun situation. And to me, like I said, this is going to be the focus on the New York subliners for one of 2 reasons. So there's 2 scenarios here. If New York beats the Atlanta FaZe, then they come in versus Boston, and let's say they beat Boston, what does that say about the NYSL? They're here. They could be a top 2, top 3 team in the game after a week like that. I feel like you'd have to put them up there. But let's say they lose versus Atlanta. They come into this game versus Boston. There's some questions. It's like, okay, they lose versus FaZe. Let's say they get humbled a little bit. Now they come into a match versus Boston. This match, I mean, massively turns them in one direction versus the other, because if they were to beat Boston, go 1-1 on the week, we're like, okay, cool. They're okay. That was a solid W versus a great Breach team. Breach feels like the gatekeepers right now to top 4, top 5 area. But if they were to lose to Boston, go 0-2, like, okay, it was a fluke. It was a fluke. Like, that's just the way the CDL works. That's how fast things go here. They go 2-0, they are kings. They go 0-2, and we're like, okay, I guess NYSL is just not that team anymore. That's the way that it works. That's how quickly the the qualifiers go, especially here at Major 3. That is how crazy things can turn. And obviously for the Boston side, it's their first match of the Major 3 qualifiers. Not an easy game to start off with, especially for a New York team who, like I said, is going to be off of a match versus FaZe. Their guns are firing. They're hot. They're excited. I have New York beating FaZe, which gives them all kinds of hype. I think that's a 50-50 game, so it very well could be New York 0-1 or 1-0. But I think that we all know what we're going to get, right, from Boston Breach. A top 5 team type of performance where it feels like they have finally started to level out. They're this consistent team. We know that the heights that they can reach. We know the talents that they have across all of the modes. We know that Methods is a man on fire. It just depends on, really, to me, the way that New York plays. And I feel like they are the team to circle without a doubt this week. I think alongside Optic, alongside Thieves, those 2 teams, and then I think New York. I think, to me, the 3 teams to look out for the most. If you were to be like, okay, I can only watch so many teams this week, to me, the teams to look out for are New York, Optic, and LAT. I think those are the most interesting rosters to watch throughout this week. And I think that LA Thieves go 2-0, Optic go 1-1, and New York go 2-0. I do. I think that they take this. I mean, what if they beat FaZe 3-2? I'm going to say 3. No, I'll say 3-1. I'll go with 3-1. I think the timing of these matchups for New York possibly could be perfect. I think if you are in YSL, you want to face off against some top dogs instantly after you just won a tournament. I mean, what? Why not? Why would you not want to do that? Or why would you not want to face off against a team when you're in your mojo? I want to face off against a top caliber roster right off the rip, and 2 of those to be exact. So some wild results. We'll go and lock in these predictions. We will press save in the top right, which means that these are good. Now, I can go back and change these, but very rarely do I actually do that. I hope that you guys obviously did enjoy going along, maybe doing your pick'ems with me, just hearing my thoughts on some of the matches as well. Like I said, guys, this is going to be such a fun week. Like, I'm so excited to have the qualifiers back again. We're hopping into Major 3. The Toronto Ultra Major is upon us. And like I said, we have got 8 teams that absolutely can compete. I think all 12 rosters have got the chance. And we're talking about Paris walking away with series. We're talking about LAG who just were the champions at the Major 2 tournament, possibly having an 0-2 week. Wild stuff. And so in conclusion, like we said, we've got New York 2-0, beating Boston and Atlanta. If they're able to do that, that puts them in such elite status. Atlanta fall in their early match. What does that say about them moving forward? LAT go 2-0. Are they back at the snap of a finger just like that? Will Seattle be in shambles after going 0-2? They definitely will if they go 0-2, but will they go winless throughout their first week? And then Optic go a smooth 1-1 with ProLoot in the lineup. And those are your major headlines, at least from my predictions coming into this week. I'm hoping for 7 out of 10. I'd be happy with 70%. We're shooting free throws out here, so I'm hoping we can do that. If we at least get 7, I'll be somewhat content. If we go 8, I'll be thrilled. If we go 9, I'm gonna go wild. If we go 10 for 10, I don't know. We're just making up stuff as we go on. But let me know, guys, your predictions, obviously, down in the comments below. If you have made it all the way to this part of the video, I greatly appreciate it. If you have not hit the subscribe button, I highly recommend that you do that. Like I said, we're gonna be having these videos come out all throughout the remainder of the season. All of these weeks, whether it's at the majors, if I have to do it live on location, I've already done that. I'll do it again. If I have to, do it in a hospital room because my wife is pregnant, I will definitely make sure that it happens, at least at some sort. They may kick me out, but we'll do it if we have to. I greatly appreciate you guys for always tuning into the series. You guys have been awesome. I constantly get tweets. I constantly get people asking me, are we going to be having lock-ins for this week? And it was sad for me to say no when it came down to the Pro-Am, but I promise you that we're back. We're better than ever. Hopefully in the prediction column. Like I said, you guys have a great week. Enjoy the matches. And I will see you guys next time for what could be a even wilder week 2 here at our Major 3 qualifiers. You guys enjoy the matches, and I'll see you back here next time.